So good evening. Today is the 10th of October 2019, and we bring together Peter Mitev, Marybeth Armitage,
Hi.
and myself, Richard Armitage, to talk to you on a particular topic this evening. And the suggested topic is perfection and ease. This is a topic that Marybeth has been exploring over some years, to my knowledge. So perhaps we will move straight away to invite Marybeth to commence.
All right. Hello, everyone. Perfection and ease. I'm kind of excited to be talking to the two of you about this today because I have been working on it on and off for many, many years. It goes in and out of consciousness for me, really. But when I met Rick 7 years ago, it was something I was playing with very substantially at that time. So what I'm hoping is that the energy of this actually comes through to both of you and that you can feel it. So I'll just start with some background, some stories, and we'll see if we can actually pull it out so you can feel it. I don't remember creating it. I know it's mine. I don't know anybody else that uses it the way that I do, that feels the perfection the way that I feel the perfection, or brings the ease into it the way that I have done. I had it reflected to me by several friends, I don't know, 10 years ago probably. And they started referring to that as my perfection and ease that I would bring through, and that was how I ran my life, how I did things. We were playing in a group then called Mastering Alchemy, and one of the things that we were learning within that group was playing with vibrations of words. So we did a lot with different platforms of words, and we worked with 3 words at a time normally, which is why I say I know I didn't create this consciously, because this one came out as 2, and the perfection and ease kind of worked within everything that I did. But it was reflected back to me many times that I was using this, and I got to really like it. There is such a joy in life for me to bring in every aspect of my life, to just bring the perfection through in that moment, in that experience, in the whatever it is that I'm doing. And I don't remember bringing the ease then. But it always was with these. It just happened. Just the way it was for me. The perfection just flowed. And there came a point where so in this class we were the words that we used then is that we had this planet was in the 3rd dimension, and that we were moving to the 5th dimension. And so there was a lot of focus around that type of labeling. And in my mind, I felt the way that perfection has been used on the earth plane so far, that perfection was one of those words that was more a 3rd dimensional word, and that we wouldn't be using it in the 5th dimension. So even though I loved it, and I loved how I was using it in my life, there came a point where I said, okay, I'm going to give it up, because it's going to become an anchor to me. It got me to where I am. It's been working really well, but I need to move on and do the next phase of whatever we're doing. And I decided, I remember deciding to let that one go and move on to whatever the words we were given in class were probably. And that night in class, so we had class once a week, that within a 24-hour period anyway, that night of class or the next night, it was Yeshua, or Jesus, that came in to speak to us, and we would have different masters of ascended masters come in and speak. And Yeshua came in, and he was speaking to the group, our group, and we're probably a couple hundred people. So it wasn't specifically for me. It wasn't a channeling about me. Nobody knew what I was doing in my world at that time. And when Yeshua spoke to us, he spoke about some of his time when he walked the earth, and he spoke about the perfection that he used, that he walked in. And I heard very clearly, I heard, don't give up the perfection, Marybeth. This is part of what we're bringing in. And in my feeling back then, it was kind of a validation, like, well, if Yeshua can do it and talk about it, then it's okay that I still hold on to it. It's like, okay, you don't have to give it up. So that's kind of my beginning with it. From that moment, I haven't let go of allowing it to be in my life and allowing it to permeate what I do, and to allow other people to step into it as they wanted to step into it. So one of the things that I noticed with it in talking with other people was this definition of perfection. So what I came to find is when I would speak of perfection, most people didn't really want to hear about it. Because perfection is something that's not attainable, is one of the definitions. It's something that maybe you aim for, but there is then value put upon this not being perfect and being okay with it. And for me, there was this joy in perfection, but perfection and being perfect are really different things to me. When something lands in perfection, there's not a rigidness to it. There's not a hardness to it. There's not a, oh, you didn't do it right if it's not perfect. Because within the perfection that I found, there was always a joy attached to it. So when I played with it consciously, I could bring the perfection and ease into any aspect that I wanted to create. So if I was stepping into something and I wanted to be more certain, so I wanted to bring a certainty into a project that I was working on that maybe I didn't feel certain about, but I'd step into the vibration of certainty, and I would add the perfection and ease to uplift it, to work with it. And it worked with everything, is what I found. When I was playing with these triangles back then, any platform that I wanted to create, I could just add the perfection and ease to it, and that really uplifted whatever I was doing. And I did find that when I wasn't consciously working with it, when it just flowed by itself, the vibration that always came with it was joy. It always made me laugh. It always made me just so pleased with how things happened and how they came out. The other thing I'm seeing in the moment to share is that perfection is not an end result. That's also another definition I feel like people get to. It's like, when you're perfect, then you're done. Like a happily ever after type of thing. But perfection is the journey. The perfection is allowing each moment to be what it is. It's allowing each moment to come to you in the perfection of what's available for you in that moment. So it's not an end thing. It's not, oh, I'm done then. So from the being perfect, it's never going to be perfect, because in the next moment you're going to want to flow it into something else and have it feel a little different, or interact with a different person in a different way with it. So there is it's become a way of life for me. It's just become the way that I see life, the way that I do life. So there's kind of my introduction to it for both of you. Don't know if either of you have any comments around that.
Well, to me, I saw it as, so far what you've said, that it's not, the perfection you speak of isn't an attainment or something to be reached. It's more a way of sort of having that almost as a lens in which then you can actually see the perfection that is there anywho. And it's like only through like working with that perfection and ease could you then have noticed the perfection that was always there, and the ease sort of adds, well, it's not difficult to actually notice it and then to flow with it, and then to participate in it and actually notice and learn from it and interact with it and participate. But within itself, so far what you've said, it's a whole teaching, in the sense that it doesn't do one area, or it's just like a slogan about becoming perfect. It's a whole world view in a sense. And within that, it is a whole teaching that is really beautiful so far from what I've heard.
Thank you. Yes, I would say that. Yes, that's a great way to say it. It is a worldview, or my view anyway. Do you have anything to?
Well, a number of things, because I've certainly seen, Marybeth, working with perfection and ease, over a number of years, and there's a couple of comments. Well, one of the questions people often ask, young kids, what do you want in life, and it's supposed to come up with a big car or some kind of ambition, and actually, when you move that aside and you put that into qualities, say, well, what would you really like? I mean, the underlying thing of what you like, if you're going to be consistently happy, if you're going to be consistently joyful, if things are going to be flowing to you at a place that you can absorb them, that feels a good flow, if you can be connecting in a way where your life is expanding and you can grow with it and so forth. When you look at the qualities, then actually, whether you're performing this job or that job or something else, or even with one group of people or another group of people, if you've got these qualities in your life, then that caters for a great deal that is important. And further, I could put it, if you're going to put it against a spiritual backdrop of eternity, where things never really get done, because if they did, then the whole universe would have to pack up and go home, and we're done for eternity. It's not going to happen. We're going to keep on coming up with ideas. So you use the platform of ideas that's got you to this point becomes your launching point for the next set. And then you can bring ideas together in different ways and then create new subsets, which then can be combined with other things in different ways. So there's an eternality in the way that we move. But there's a beautiful generality for me in perfection and ease. And one of those pieces that I understood from perfection and ease, perfection in the sense of being really difficult to attain and this kind of final product and so on, doesn't include ease. But frankly, if it's not perfect, if it's not got ease associated with it, if it's really difficult and stressful, is it perfect if it's stressful? You have to think, I don't know about that one. So some things you want some challenge. So maybe part of the perfection is having some challenge associated with it. Yeah. So, but they are literally, it's like cooking cooking a pie. What qualities do you want to put in it? Put perfection in it, but bring ease into it, because that softens that and it makes it attainable. And then there can be a real enthusiasm for that. And then when that has unfolded, then you can create the next level with, again, with this blending of perfection and ease. So I have found particularly powerful, Marybeth, what you've brought forward. And I've loved the way those two qualities can be appended to anything. So you append them to kind of form a triangle. You could put in perhaps more than 3 items, but I see it the way that molecules form. So you have those two, and you add a third to kind of complete, there's a kind of strength in that structure. And then those two qualities get imparted to whatever else it is that you're actually going for. Well, I like it very much. It's fun.
So one of the things that I heard within that was this draw to the ease part of the perfection and ease. With me, I always felt it more as the perfection. That's the part that gave me, I felt like the biggest joy. I think it gave me permission to be more perfect. But a lot of people too, when we have spoken with them, or when I have spoken with them, I have felt that other people don't hold perfection the same way that I do. It might be something that they might think they want to have but could never attain. So when you switch it around and you call it ease and perfection, and work with people that way. Sometimes you can just watch a total softening take place in them, where they can rest in that ease. They can rest in the, oh, I like the way that feels. And the vibration works the same way. If you're have the intention to do it, when you allow your body to just go into that ease, you can allow then the perfection to start to flow through your life, because you're not being so rigid, you're not being so resistance against, you know, how that might feel or what that might look like to other people. And that's another really big thing that I've noticed. You know, when you talked about it being a worldview, I can say, yes, absolutely, I hear what you're saying in that. And I still bring that back to myself and say, well, it's my way of life, my worldview of how I look at it. But what I really notice in that is my idea of perfection, my definition, is so different than everyone else's. And it changes, like you could just hear from Rick talking about it. It changes from one moment to the next, because sometimes it feels really good to have that ease as part of that perfection. But other times, actually, to be perfect in the experience that you want to be more adventurous, or you want to be challenged, you want to think more. So there is that aspect of it. But the other part to what I think that we get stuck on with perfection is other people's idea of perfection. So a lot of times when we look at the being perfect, so much of what we're really hearing in our head is all the people who before have said, well, you're not perfect, you're not doing it right, whatever their view is of what should have been done. And this definition of perfect can only be about you. It can only be about what you want in the moment. You're the only one that can tell you what perfect is. And there's such a validation when we start to understand our own truth, our own alignment. Or as I'm listening to myself speak here, because I haven't talked about this in a long time, but I'm really hearing how this is connected to really so many other views. There's so many other ways that you can say what I have termed as perfection is. I mean, I've heard, as I'm listening to myself, I've heard this in so many other concepts, so many other ways it's been brought through, and they're all valid. They're all, you know, ways of walking that same path, finding who we are in our core, finding our own alignment, finding how to be in that joy.
Yeah, I really, it is really familiar. It's incredibly familiar. And I feel like the equation of perfection and ease, within that equation, ease is almost not a vital part. It's almost there. This is what I was feeling from what you're saying. It's almost there only because the current consciousness requires ease as the doorway through which that your perception of perfection can be almost even seen. And then beyond that, you can explore with it, you can challenge yourself. It can be difficult in a great way, and
Yes.
that's awesome. And that's part of it. But the ease is just the doorway for the average perception to even enter that perception.
Yes. Yes, very, very well said. That's exactly what it is.
It was beautifully put.
Yes.
Ease has within it that sense of well-being, that base of well-being from which you can approach something.
Yeah.
And perfection has not had that on the earth plane for quite a while. You would not put the word perfection with well-being for quite a while. But if you think about it, in the foundation of this creation has to be woven perfection into it. Perfection has to be one of the major foundational archetypes that this world was created on. When you look at the minuteness or the expansiveness of the creation of the planets, of the atoms, of the molecules, of our human bodies, if you look at anything on this creation, you can't help but see the perfection in it, in the way that it works. But we've lost that. And I do think that that's intuitively, or however this landed within me, you know, really, you said it well, why the ease is there. And I think why I don't focus on the ease very much, because I have fallen in love with the precision that I can be within this perfection model. It's like, I love, you know, calling it an archetype, if you want to call it that. I love the archetype of perfection. The ease came with it, and it was always reflected back that way to me. But it might have been because that was just something that I loved and who I was, so that other people looking at it always saw the ease around it, because it wasn't a struggle for me. It wasn't a trying to be something I'm not, or trying to make myself be perfect. But there was just a joy in the perfection that this life is, that this creation is. And that's what I think I've always felt around it. But I do think that where we are going, how we are evolving consciousness-wise, and this whole step that humanity is taking, I think a very key part of that, whether we put a label to it or not, is allowing perfection to be part of the earth plane again.
I think this awareness for people to start thinking in terms of perfection, I think the bringing ease in allows people to start to reach it. Because, okay, and if you think of the backdrop of some of the key teachings of some of the key religions, and if we take Buddhism, Buddha having been brought up in a perfect world where he was shielded from reality, then went out and then came to the conclusion that all life is suffering. And then when you look at some of the Christian teachings, one of the fundamental teachings is that we're all sinners. You know, there's nothing perfection. We're all bad and rotten, and the only chance we've got is if someone is going to say, "All right, I'll let you off." But so allowing us to get back on the horse and start to become more of what we're trying to become. That ease, I think, allows that to happen. And Marybeth, with her practice, has got used to enjoying that sense of perfection. And perhaps you do drive more for that with less focus on ease. But for me personally, I've needed more focus on ease. So indeed, whereas she had her two words, I had two different words that I worked with when I met her. And my two words were effortless abundance. But the effortless corresponds very much to the ease, because you could see, you know, I saw nature being full of abundance, and then I saw people working really hard and struggling, you know, to make ends meet, you know, from a monetary level. So effortlessness and ease, you know, they're ingredients I like.
You also said that it's like something that this is something to like almost to reach, but it's also just like right here, like it's just here. And I'd like to almost ask Marybeth, somebody, so you described that the existence, you just can't help but see the perfection everywhere, because it's so perfect in all its but somebody who never received or met somebody that felt that way, and has never felt or seen any perfection around them, or perceived it at least, what would you say to somebody like this, and what could be a way to begin to perceive perfection, in a sense?
Well, again, it's hard to answer when I'm not actually with the person who's asking it, because I can see that you can feel it. Given the way that you asked the question, I would really recommend starting with a curiosity. What would perfection look like right now? What might it feel like? If I wanted to see perfection, what might that mean to me? And I would allow thoughts, ideas, in the perfection of the way that they land, to begin to just land and to notice what it means to me. Like I would even start with my own definition. So when I hear the word perfection, a couple things, you know, on an intellectual level, what does it mean to me? But even more than that, on a deeper level than that, deeper meaning more internal, can I be aware of how I feel within me when I hear the word perfection? Am I aware of anybody speaking in my mind at me when I hear the word perfection? What conjures up, you know, within me or within you, or you know, however you want to look at this. But that's where I'd start with it, because if I were to give a definition of what I feel as perfection today, I could give you a different definition of it tomorrow, because I'm kind of a different person tomorrow. So for me to give another person my idea of perfection and what to look for, other than noticing, like I call it the smile in your heart, you know, that piece where something happens where you just smile or you just laugh. And I start to term that as perfection, because I think that's what life should be. I think that's what life is. And when we hit those moments, we're internally happy for no good reason. You know, how we think, how we feel emotionally can affect how we feel physically as well. And it's possible to go from what I would call a state of not well-being to magically being in a state of well-being and not knowing how we got there, because we're not aware always of the shifts that's going on within us. But when we can start to bring awareness to any of those levels of ourselves, we can start to bring awareness to this question of, what is perfection for me? What is it that makes me smile inside? What is it that when I think that or when I feel that, I actually feel better? I actually sit up straighter. I actually have a smile on my face. I think those are the ways I would start to play with it. Because there's always a way in. There's a setting and intention. And that's simply having the thought, wow, I'd like to try that coat on. I'd like to see what it would just feel like to be able to feel that, and then see if I want to play with it more or not. Maybe perfection isn't something that I do want. But setting the intention to want to feel it allows that experience to start to come into your own experience. If we have the thought, oh no, I don't want that, or I'm afraid of that, or whatever, we're not going to be able to see it, even if it's right there necessarily. But just setting the intention, saying, I'd like to know, is another way to do it. And what I have found around that in my own playing with it, you know, this comes back to the mental part of us, that when we want something, we try to figure out how to do it. And there's like this mental piece. It's like, okay, well, I'll set my intention and I'll try to feel this. And in things like this where you don't know what it feels like, it's really hard to get there by trying. And I found it I took some lessons one time in ballroom dancing. And ever since then, I kind of call things a dance when I'm trying to bring them into my experience, when I don't know how to bring them into my experience. So if I don't have a role model, if I don't have oh, that's what I'm going for, I view it as learning to dance, where I will put my attention on learning the steps. But then when you actually start to dance, and you're actually dancing, you're not in your thoughts anymore. You're not thinking what foot goes where. At some point, the body takes over and it knows how to do it. And that's really true in these levels of us as well. Part of our body, I don't know which body it is, but part of who we are knows how to do these things. So for me, when I acknowledge that it's just a dance and it will open on its own, I'll learn how to flow with it as I as I practice, as I put attention on it, that's always worked for me. So those are kind of my 3 ways in to something like that if you have no access otherwise.
I found the thing you said about the inner smile a really good route into almost anyone on this planet's experiential experience, because we've all just seen a baby or something and we just smiled, and that is a moment that you can relate to. And yeah, that was pretty damn perfect.
Yes.
And as you were talking, another just a concept came in that I'd like to just ask you how it relates to perfection and ease, which is the concept of the emotional guidance system. I don't know if you've heard of it, but what the concept suggests is that our emotions aren't necessarily what we think they are, or most people think they are, but the more perfect or uplifting or blissful your emotion is related exactly to whatever you're thinking being more or less true. So if you're thinking, I'm like, everything is all right, I am at ease, everything is good, nothing is hurting me, everything is flowing, you feel great. And if you think, I am useless, nobody loves me, everyone hates me, the universe is crap, God is an arsehole, whatever, you feel absolutely terrible and depressed. And I don't know, that just really came up as you were talking, because it's like the perfection, perceiving it more often is going higher up into the emotional sphere, into the higher levels of the emotions, and feeling more true things because they're more perfect in a sense. But I don't know how that relates.
I'm not sure how it relates either, because that's not anything I've played with directly. But I guess there's a couple things that I see in there. I'm not sure that they're actually answering your question, though, so you might have to come back and rephrase the question. But what it takes me back to, as you were speaking, is these different definitions on the earth plane of perfection. And when we're in that somebody else's perfection, or I need to be perfect, or that whole aspect of it, which isn't what I would call my definition of perfection and what I am bringing into the world. It's the older definition that we're trying to step away from. But that to me felt like your second option of, where we can be on the emotional guidance chart. And to me, what's underlying that desire to be perfect is a belief that I'm not perfect. It's a belief that I'm not okay. And so that reaching for talking about perfection in that way is more on that lower end of the emotional system, really. And I don't think that when if you just speak of perfection and you just speak of the words around it, I think if you hold perfection that way, you're never going to find that smile in your heart. I don't think it's ever going to show up if you're striving for perfection. If you're striving for perfection, because it's really different being in perfection and ease than striving for perfection. Whereas I feel like perfection in the way that I'm looking to share this, bring this through, is really coming from that higher plane of, if you want to call it this way, using these words, knowing that I'm perfect. So then knowing that I'm okay, right where I am, right what I'm doing, right what's happening in this moment. So I guess that's really the biggest thing that I feel in the way that you ask that question is that it again comes back to the different ways of looking at it, which is great when we're playing on the mental field and trying to learn it and find our way through it. But when you, well, okay, so I can say it this way. When you can feel and live this vibration of perfection and ease, and you can allow things to always flow through you, knowing that it's going to be perfect for you in that moment, you're always going to be on that higher scale of that emotional guidance. You're always going to be in alignment with yourself. You're always going to be thinking the best thoughts about what's possible in that moment because you've set perfection around it. And it's always going to be perfect for you, which means the universe is always going to be flowing to you what you want. And so another really big piece in that is we're living on a physical earth plane. We're not living in this in the bliss of the all the day. So perfection isn't about, again, it's not getting to this place where nothing bad happens. It's not about getting to this place where we're not living anymore and we're not creating anymore. Perfection's not about, when you have things come into your life that, anybody else looking at it would say, oh, that's not perfect. You're not doing it right. There's always, to me, the higher that you can go in this perfection needs, the more that can actually come into your life that to other people looks negative. But to you, you recognize it can't be because that's not what you create. And there's going to be a gift in it. It's something that you're asking for in a very conscious way, or it wouldn't have landed the way it has. So there's a lot to this. I keep seeing different threads as we're speaking here. I see a lot of what it's not. Because people are often looking for what I'll call a way out of life, a way out of the hardships of life, a way out of the suffering of life. And we tend to, a lot of people on the earth plane yet are still in this belief that there is suffering, that life is hard, that life is a struggle. And when they hear me talk about things like that, the thought is, well, when I can get there, then I won't have any problems anymore. And that's not my experience of what it is. My experience is when problems actually land in my life, I know that I'm going to know what to do with them. I know that I'm going to have the perfect wisdom come in. I'm going to have the right person walk into my life. I'm going to be able to, step into a level of certainty that I've never done before. It's always going to give me a growth, a strength, an upliftment, a well-being, even if it looks like a problem to begin with. So it's not about stepping out of this life. It's about stepping more deeply into this life and not being afraid of anything. Because when you can hold this vibration, regardless of what's going on around you, you always, experience after experience will show you that when you're in something new, you'll know what to do with it. You'll know how to walk through it.
So in some ways, what I'm finding about perfection, it has to do with choosing viewpoints. Because you could look at something and you could deliberately find things about something that are not perfect. Or you could deliberately look at things that are perfect. You could look at some difficult struggles that you've had and point out that they were difficult and weren't perfect. Or you could look at it from a different perspective and say they were actually a perfect training, in fact, for this particular point in my life, which has now empowered me to do this. So it's not so much about a truth, because you could argue any viewpoint, But when you start to choose, you look for the perfection. I've seen Marybeth, and something will go wrong. You know, things go wrong, and it's like, oh, well, I didn't see that coming. It wasn't my intention at all. That Marybeth, well, she'll just, whereas I might feel depressed or kind of taken aback or whatever. There's been many instances of this, and she will look at it and she will say no. She said that the only reason that has come is it's going to bring with it an opportunity for a greater gift. And as soon as you put that viewpoint on it, then you take the sting out of what's happening and you start looking for the gift. And when you look for the gift, it allows that to kind of come out of the woodwork. You recognize benefits. If instead you've decided that there are no benefits and that it's actually a disaster, then when anybody talks to you, that's automatically your excuse to feel bad, because that equals bad. So you align this kind of linking of things. So perfection, it's almost a way of life that Marybeth has adopted. It is. And I think that word ease helps some of the rest of us to get on the bus a bit. I think she doesn't need that so much, but I do, because otherwise it's like a tall order, really. But then I'm looking for, I can bring in some ease, and then, okay, so what could it be? And I can also invoke, I can do, okay, so if I don't see something at the moment, universe, show me the perfection in this. Because I'd like this to be proved to be useful. Show me how it can be useful. And not try to answer it with the head. I think a lot of the times, we have questions, and well, my mind is very good at them. Sort of switching on like a computer and trying to come up with an answer. But really actually just letting go of that and allowing answers to land. It's like all we have to do is raise a question, and the universe will respond by delivering a thought that's in line with that question, or in line with perfection. So how don't understand how that fits with perfection and ease. So universe, show me that one, and then you go and have a cup of tea or whatever you do. And then it's, oh, I see. You give an opportunity for that to land, or through the next person you speak to, and so forth. So it's a choosing. She chooses, as I'm saying, she chooses that as a framework to start to look through life from. And then she gets more and more evidence to support it.
What you were saying, Rick, it's as if the perception of perfection allows the individual that's holding that perception to be more receptive to the grace or the opportunities that are just always there, and to transmute that into a more positive thing, and something that benefits, rather than being whatever. Yeah. And what Marybeth, the beginning of your answer that you gave earlier, what came to mind was a transmutation of language, in the sense that I'm seeing the movement from the third dimensional reality to the fifth dimensional reality. It's not that the words have to change, it's that they are being transmuted, and the way they're being received is different. And I remember going to my dad's church when I was younger, and really like feeling judged and all these things. And I remember more recently going to my dad's church, sitting down, listening to a sermon, and being like, these words are so beautiful. And so I was just ecstatic. It was just so good. Like the words that were happening. Whereas in the past, the ways I was feeling them was different. So it's not the words that are wrong or causing trouble. It's the perception of them, and the work that is there to move from the third to the fifth requires a transmutation of the perception of the words and what they mean within and what they conjure up within.
Yes, again, very well said. I absolutely agree with you. And I think that that's how we are getting from the third dimension to the fifth dimension, if you want to label it that way. We're doing the work. We're transmuting it. We're changing it word by word or vibration by vibration, however you want to look at it. But I think that's exactly what we're doing. I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, and I feel with that focus on perfection, there's more and more this attunement of getting used to aligning with an opportunity for things to flow in perfection. Marybeth is very good at being non-self-critical, and a lot of us are taught to consider, put everybody else up and say, oh well, you're all beautiful, you're all fantastic. Of course, I'm not, and so forth. There's a sort of humility that is clearly, bragging isn't always well received either. So there's a balance, for what you're going to pitch for. But Marybeth is willing to recognise the perfection in herself, or within her human construct, and because she can see it in herself, she can also then see it in other people. So she's looking for it, and I think sometimes what I see in a lot of people is they're not sort of looking for the perfection in themselves. They're looking, or what's more readily coming to terms is the judgment. It could be judgment of others, or it could be judgment of self. But dropping that judgment and putting that to one side, because those emotions have creative power. If you put a judgment on something, if I put a judgment on somebody and say, oh, this is a terrible person because of this, this, and this, of course, when I meet that person, I've now got that judgment sitting, oh, this is a terrible person, and therefore I'm going to respond potentially as a terrible person, or I'm holding that back, and so forth. And whereas if I find a much lighter way to hold it, that it could be, oh, everybody has had bad days, Okay, and anyway.
No, totally.
Let's move on. I can recount some bad days too. So what? But it's the laughter, and one of the things that differentiated when something would go wrong in our lives, I'd be, and Marybeth would laugh, and I think that's not appropriate.
Marybeth is often not appropriate.
She'd laugh, and I think, that's not very helpful. But it's just her response. She wouldn't get hung up in the seriousness, and then because of that, she'd be more ready to allow a brighter solution to land. Or at the very least, she wouldn't be going around, in a dark mood, having a miserable day. If that's all that does, because the fact is the same. Something's happened, it's happened, hasn't it? It's going to be dealt with. But if you can connect to that more beautiful flow of energy, then the quality of life changes, and it attracts more. And that perfection, therefore, that she's brought through, I've seen her just grow with that. And ease has grown as well.
Yeah.
This entire concept has been just so familiar. I feel like I've never worked with those words, but I've worked with that energy. And in the sense that one thing that I love doing is doing something that I've never done before, as if I'm a professional and like I've always done it. And like the cool thing about that is, if I've noticed actually that within that process, I'm actually messing up like loads of times in a row, actually, because I'm constantly making an attempt, but because at no point am I stopping and then making it obvious that I'm just winging it here. It just seems like I've always done it, and that's just the process of it, the way it comes across. Like you try and say something and you mess it up, and then you just try again, and because you messed up, the idea for the better way to respond comes about only through the messing up, and then just but allowing that flow to happen, and just sort of stepping into that openness to have the perfection arise by just penetrating it with just not at any point ceasing and criticizing, but looking for the next step in a sense. And it is very common, as Rick said, to sort of self-criticize and these kinds of things. And it's this concept really is very beautiful and very powerful and key to what's going on at the moment on this planet, because it's a medicine where we shouldn't have to feel that we're arrogant because we're appreciating our perfection.
Right.
And it's really beautiful to just be, I did so good. Like, it was so good. Right. And it's great. And I love doing that. And people look at me a bit weird sometimes, but I don't do it too often or publicly. It's like this internal thing, because otherwise you're just going around ranting about how awesome you are, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, no, it's just so relevant, and it's very familiar. And I really resonate with everything you've spoken about so far. Do you have any more stories within your own life of ways in which that's sort of played things out, or just, yeah?
Wow, no stories come to mind as you ask that. They don't. I kind of feel like it often runs in the background of things. No, I don't really have any.
You don't really consciously.
I don't. Yeah, I guess that's it, and that's true with me of a lot of things. I'm aware of it when I've been aware of it more when people have reflected things back to me on how things work. I am aware of how it feels when we have a discussion on it, when someone wants to know about it. But I don't really.
It wouldn't be useful.
I don't really.
The forefront of your mind.
What's that?
It wouldn't actually be useful to be at the forefront of your mind. It's the backdrop to which then things flow.
It is. It's more of a way of life than a detailed thing for me. Yeah. It's just the way things flow. And if I were to give you stories, they would be synchronicities and how things land in a perfect way or whatever. But again, it's not anything new. It's yeah, it is really interesting because it's such a fundamental part of me. It's not something that I actually have the thought that, oh, I'm perfect. That doesn't ever cross my mind. There would be no correlation for that really. But things happen perfectly in my life. And I think what I enjoy is the perfection of the creation, meaning all aspects of it. You were talking about stepping into something that you've not done before and just being the professional on it, just knowing you can do it and watching yourself learn to be the professional is really what you're doing when you're doing that. And to me, that's the perfection of being a creator. If you could do everything with the snap of a finger and just say, oh, now I'm gonna do this, and you could just do it and not have that ability to actually create it, figure out what goes into it, figure out what makes that dance the dance, or the whatever it is that we're learning to do. To me, that's the perfect. As I'm saying this, I've never heard myself say this before, but the perfection is living in this body in this lifetime. It's not about what happens. It's not about what comes in. It's not about, all of these other, it's not about trying to get out of this body and be something different or be spiritual or whatever. It's really about being perfectly who I am in this body, in this lifetime. And it's a really fundamental part of who I am. But I was hearing something that you said earlier, or maybe it was something Rick said, I don't remember, but it was this acknowledgement of this, I'll call it the going from the third dimension to the fifth dimension, because we've kind of been playing along those lines today. But if we're not willing to be that new higher vibration of whatever word we want to use, we'll just use perfection because that's the one we're playing with today. If I'm not willing to be perfection vibrationally and allow that to come to me and allow that to flow out from me, there's no way to give that to anybody else. I can't see the perfection in someone else truly if I can't see the perfection in me. And again, like you're saying before, all these words are they've been used so many times in so many ways that I've never heard it so clearly the way I'm speaking it right now. It's like, wow, this is just so consistent with everything that's happening on the earth right now. It's like we know these words, we know how to do it. Mentally, it's been here. I've read it in books, I've heard it from people, and it's just it's where we're all going. It really is where we're all going. It's really what we're creating. My experience is we create it by being willing to be it ourselves, by willing to actually pick it up and say, yep, that's who I am. That's how I do it. And then when other people watch you do it, they can say, oh yeah, I want that. But if it's just words, but I'm not willing to say, oh yes, I am that, then it's just words. And if people didn't have it before, they're not going to have it after that. So if we really want to bring this through, if we really want to bring these changes through to humanity, we have to be willing to not be self-critical. We have to be willing to look at the glory of who we are. And not in an arrogant way, and not in a, oh, look at me, I'm better than anything. But it can be look at what we can be. Look at what's possible in these human bodies that we've not given ourselves credit for before.
It's about transmitting it through the action and the body. It's about embodying and not philosophizing and spreading messages without an embodiment of it, because then it's empty, and it might inspire somebody to embody, but you're embodying anywho. So yeah, the one distinction, or not, I don't want to say distinction, but I've heard it also said, so a common thing that's arising is that people are being told that they're perfect just the way they are. And I feel that that's sometimes received in a disconnected way. And I just want to comment in the sense that perfect just the way you are doesn't mean that you don't have much potential that you're not currently utilizing or embodying. It means that where you are in your own journey right now is perfect for you, but there is much more to do, and this is not a call to laziness or procrastination or to lethargy. This is a call to adventure and to accept where you are right now and actually be here and live the adventure that's right here, rather than running away elsewhere, and really being here to live the perfection that is your experience. But that doesn't mean that there isn't so much more that we're capable of, that within our potential, and there is more perfection that we can manifest. But our current position of where we're at is perfect in that way. That
was very well said. Very well said.
This has been a really nice conversation.
Yes, it's been fun. Thank you. Well, this has been very enjoyable.
Well, thank you, Marybeth. Thank you, Peter. So perhaps that is a good time to draw the conversation to a natural close. I don't know if there are any closing comments from you, Marybeth?
I would just say enjoy your day. Okay.
Peter?
I just want to say thank you to both of you for, well, we're just having so much fun, it seems. And I hope that whoever's watching this has as much fun.
Hope so too. Brilliant. And develops that and allows the seed of that idea for, because these thoughts are like seeds and they don't necessarily manifest immediately, but they can lodge there. And then it can link to something that happens tomorrow or something happens next week or next month. They're like little seeds and shoots come up from them. And then you can start to bring some of this, more of this into your life and convert, bring more joy into that life progressively. That's another way of looking at perfection. Well, I had so much joy this year, but the following year I had, it was a bit more. There's a bit more. There's a bit more. You've constructive ways of looking at things. So it's helpful. Anyway, it's absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much, Marybeth, for expounding on one of your favourite topics.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you, Peter.
And thank you, Peter.